I discovered my wife was having an affair with a coworker. I planned a backyard party, inviting him and his wife to publicly expose their affair. The party turned into a public confrontation, with everyone in the neighborhood witnessing the betrayal. It was a regular Saturday morning in early fall, the kind of day that carried a crisp chill in the air. I had just finished mowing the lawn and was looking forward to a cold beer when I walked inside and noticed my wife, Lisa, on the couch. She was laughing at something on her phone, her face glowing with the light from the screen. It wasn't unusual for Lisa to be absorbed in her phone, but something about the way she was laughing struck me as different. The laughter felt too personal, too lighthearted. It was almost as if she was sharing an inside joke with someone. She didn't even glance up when I walked past her into the kitchen. I brushed it off at first, telling myself that Lisa had always been outgoing and friendly. I trusted her, but as days went on, her behavior became harder to ignore. She was more secretive with her phone, guarding it like a precious artifact. She started staying late at work more often, claiming that her company had a big project they were working on. I heard this excuse before, but there was always an unsettling edge to it. Then there were the late-night texts. It wasn't something she'd ever done before. Late one afternoon, as she went upstairs to shower, leaving her phone charging on the kitchen counter, I found myself standing there, torn. I knew I shouldn't invade her privacy, but my gut told me that something was off. The phone sat there in front of me, and before I knew it, I picked it up. Her passcode hadn't changed. That was her first mistake. What I saw sent shockwaves through me. A string of messages from someone named Brian filled the screen. My heart sank as I scrolled through the conversation. The messages were flirtatious, peppered with inside jokes and references to late-night rendezvous. The latest one read, "Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you." My hands began to shake as I kept scrolling. The dates matched perfectly with her work late nights. There were even selfies of Lisa and Brian together, laughing in what appeared to be a hotel room. She hadn't even tried to be subtle. My breath quickened, and my stomach turned. Lisa, the woman I had loved and trusted for over a decade, was having an affair. The realization hit me harder than I could have ever imagined. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The shock quickly gave way to anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. But above all, I felt like a fool. How had I not seen this coming? How long had this been happening right under my nose? I set her phone down just as I heard the water stop upstairs. My heart was pounding in my chest as I forced myself to keep my composure. I couldn't confront her right then. I needed time to think, to gather myself and figure out how to handle this. If I stormed in and accused her right away, she'd deny it, spin the story to make herself the victim, and somehow, I'd end up being the bad guy. No, I had to be smarter than that. I needed a plan. That night, I barely slept. Lisa lay next to me, oblivious to the storm that was brewing in my mind. I replayed the events of the past few months over and over, piecing together the clues. The late nights, her increasingly distant behavior, the phone that never left her side. Then there was Brian. Who was he? Did he know about me? Was he married? The questions swirled. But one thing was certain, I needed more information. The next morning, while Lisa was still asleep, I dove into research mode. It didn't take long to track down Brian's identity. A quick search through Lisa's social media revealed a photo from her company's holiday party last year. There he was, Brian. He was one of her coworkers. But it got worse. Brian wasn't just any colleague. He was married. His wife, Karen, was tagged in several photos with him and their 2 young children. The discovery hit me like a ton of bricks, but it also gave me an idea. If Brian had a wife, then he had just as much to lose as Lisa did. I wasn't the only one being betrayed. A strange sense of vindication washed over me. But it wasn't enough. I needed to know more about Karen. Did she suspect anything? Did she feel the same sense of unease that I had? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I wanted to meet her not just to share my pain, but to plan something bigger. Something that would make both Lisa and Brian regret every single moment of their affair. By the time Lisa came home that afternoon, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to be the passive, heartbroken husband. I wasn't going to let this destroy me. I was going to take control. And Lisa had no idea what was coming. The following morning, after a sleepless night, I woke up with a strange sense of calm. The initial wave of devastation had passed, replaced by a cold, calculated resolve. Lisa had betrayed me, and now it was time for her to face the consequences. I wasn't going to confront her with tears or anger. I was going to do it my way, and I would make sure she felt every ounce of the weight of her choices. I spent the day gathering information about Brian and Karen. I needed to understand who they were as a couple. I couldn't just approach Karen with half-formed suspicions. I needed to know everything. Karen's social media painted a picture of domestic bliss. She was the perfect wife, the perfect mother, someone who posted pictures of family outings, soccer games, and vacations. Everything seemed perfect. And the contrast between her life and Brian's secret affair only fueled my rage. The timeline of their affair was clearer now. At least 6 months, maybe more. I couldn't believe the lengths they had gone to hide it, the effort they put into deceiving me. The more I uncovered, the angrier I became. I needed a plan. It would be a public reckoning, a backyard gathering, casual, normal. Lisa would never suspect a thing. But there was a twist. I was going to invite Karen, Brian's wife, to the party. I wanted to make sure she understood exactly what had been going on behind her back. And when she walked into that backyard, she wouldn't just walk into a barbecue. She would walk into the truth. Step 1 was getting Karen there. I couldn't just call her up and say, "Hi, I'm the husband of the woman your husband is having an affair with. Want to come over for a barbecue?" So, I sent a polite message on Facebook, introducing myself as Lisa's husband, and explaining that we were hosting a casual neighborhood gathering. To my surprise, Karen replied graciously, confirming she and Brian would attend. The first step was done. Lisa had no idea. The next few days were spent preparing for the event. I mowed the lawn, set up the outdoor lights, and borrowed a large grill from a neighbor. I kept the menu simple but appealing: burgers, hot dogs, and a few side dishes. Everything had to look perfect, like a typical suburban barbecue. As the day approached, Lisa grew a little uneasy. She asked me if I had invited anyone from her work, and I casually mentioned a few names, omitting Brian's. The relief on her face was almost palpable. She had no idea that Brian and Karen would soon be walking through that gate. By the morning of the gathering, everything was in place. The yard was set up, and the guest list was final. I double-checked everything, ensuring that Karen would be seated near Lisa. The stage was set. The time for confrontation would come. But not yet. I had to be patient. The truth would come out soon enough. And when it did, it would be in front of everyone. The day of the backyard gathering arrived, a perfect, warm fall afternoon. The kind of day that made everything feel easy, normal. I woke up early, partly because I had last-minute preparations to make, and partly because I couldn't shake the nervous energy buzzing inside me. My mind raced with thoughts of the plan, rehearsing the steps over and over again in my head. Everything had to go smoothly. This wasn't just a barbecue, it was a meticulously planned confrontation. Lisa, completely unaware, spent the morning helping me set up. She arranged flowers on the tables, commented on how nice it would be to catch up with our friends, and picked out the perfect playlist for the evening. She acted so normal. Her calmness only made the fury inside me burn hotter. How could she stand there smiling, acting like everything was fine, when I knew what she'd been doing behind my back? But I had to keep my composure. Patience was key. By noon, everything was ready. String lights crisscrossed above the yard, casting a soft glow. The tables were set with simple yet appealing centerpieces. And the grill was hot, ready for burgers and hot dogs. It looked like any other neighborhood barbecue, friendly and unassuming. Just the way I wanted it. The guests began to trickle in: neighbors, friends, and a few of Lisa's co-workers. But my eyes kept searching the driveway, watching for the arrival of Karen and Brian. My heart raced with every passing minute. I could feel the anticipation building up. At any moment, they would walk through that gate, and everything would change. Lisa was busy chatting with some neighbors, oblivious to the drama unfolding just below the surface. She had no idea that the two people she had been deceiving would soon be standing face to face with her. I watched her laugh, her movements slightly too stiff, her eyes darting to me occasionally, as if trying to gauge if I knew something. It was delicious to watch her squirm in silence. Though I had to keep it together, I couldn't let her suspect anything. And then, there they were, Brian and Karen, hand in hand, walking through the gate with polite smiles on their faces. My heart pounded in my chest. Brian looked the part of the suburban dad: khakis, polo shirt, confident stride. But I could see the discomfort in his eyes. Karen, on the other hand, was completely unaware. She wore a sundress, her hair tied back, and a smile that made it clear she was excited to meet new people. She was radiant, the perfect picture of innocence, and it made everything feel so much more sinister. I greeted them with a smile, shaking Brian's hand firmly, and giving Karen a friendly nod. Lisa was talking to a neighbor when she noticed them, and for the briefest moment, I saw the panic flash across her face. It was gone in an instant, replaced by the most forced smile I'd ever seen. But I saw it, and that's all that mattered. I led them to the center of the yard, making sure they were seated with people who knew both Lisa and Brian. The awkwardness between the three of us was thick, but I did my best to keep things light. Karen was still oblivious to what was going on, chatting about family and hobbies, unaware of the dark undercurrent to our conversation. Brian, however, was visibly tense, sticking close to Karen, avoiding any direct contact with Lisa. It was as if he knew, deep down, that the storm was coming. As the afternoon wore on, I kept my focus. I made small talk with Karen, getting to know her a little better, all the while keeping an eye on Lisa and Brian. It was clear that Lisa was on edge, but she was doing her best to keep up appearances. Her forced laughter, the way she kept glancing at me, it was all so transparent. She couldn't relax, not with the weight of her guilt hanging over her. When dinner was served, the tension in the air was palpable. The neighbors and guests were chatting, but Lisa and Brian couldn't seem to get comfortable. Lisa kept sneaking glances at me, as if waiting for something. I knew she was trying to figure out why Brian and Karen were there, but she wouldn't ask. She couldn't afford to raise any suspicions. I let her simmer in that uncertainty, letting the tension build. I made sure Karen and Lisa were seated together during dessert, forcing them into close proximity. The tension between them was nearly unbearable. Lisa barely touched her slice of pie, her hands trembling slightly as she made awkward small talk with Karen. By this time, I could see that Lisa was struggling. She wanted to confront me, wanted to ask why I had invited Brian and Karen, but she didn't dare. She was terrified of what might come next, and that was when I knew it was time for the next step. I stood up, clinking my glass to get everyone's attention. The murmurs in the backyard died down as all eyes turned to me. Lisa looked up sharply, her face pale. Brian shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly aware that something was about to happen. Karen, still blissfully unaware, smiled politely, not understanding the tension that was thick in the air. "I just wanted to thank you all for coming tonight," I began, my voice steady. "It's not often we get to gather like this, and I think it's so important to build a sense of community." I paused, letting my words sink in. Lisa's eyes flicked to me, but I didn't break my gaze. This was it. The moment had arrived. "I also want to thank my wife, Lisa, for helping me put this together. And of course, a special welcome to Karen and Brian. It's so nice to have new faces here." The silence that followed was deafening. Lisa's smile faltered, her face growing pale. Brian shifted in his seat, his eyes darting around the yard, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Karen, still unaware, beamed brightly, completely oblivious to the storm that was about to erupt. The tension in the air was electric. I could feel it in my bones. Everyone was waiting for the next words to fall. "Well, I've got a little something to say," I continued, my voice hardening just enough for Lisa to hear. "You see, trust is the foundation of any relationship, whether it's with friends, family, or most importantly, your spouse." I let my eyes lock with Lisa's for a moment, watching her discomfort grow. "And sometimes," I said, my voice sharp, "we discover things that challenge that trust, things that force us to reevaluate who we can rely on." Lisa's mouth opened slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but no words came. Brian looked even more uncomfortable, and Karen finally looked around, sensing the change in the atmosphere. She was starting to pick up on the tension, though she had no idea why. I took a deep breath and let the moment hang in the air for just a few seconds. Then I turned to Lisa. "Oh, Lisa," I said, my voice low and pointed. "Do you want to tell everyone here about your late-night work meetings with Brian? Or should I?" The crowd's reaction was immediate. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the guests. Lisa's chair scraped against the ground as she shot to her feet, her eyes wide with disbelief. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, her voice trembling. "This isn't the time or place for whatever this is." Karen turned to Brian, her face crumpling in confusion. "What is he talking about?" she asked, her voice rising in alarm. I didn't hesitate. "I'm talking about the affair, Lisa. The one you've been having with my wife's coworker for months. I've got the texts, the photos, everything." Karen's face drained of color as the realization hit her. "Brian," she whispered, tears starting to well up in her eyes. "Is this true?" I watched as the entire backyard held its breath. The truth was out in the open now. The storm had arrived, and there was no going back. The moment the words left my mouth, the yard fell into a stunned silence. Every person there seemed to hold their breath, eyes flicking between me, Lisa, Brian, and Karen. Lisa's face turned ghostly pale, her jaw trembling. Brian, standing by the fence, suddenly looked much smaller than he had just moments before. His shoulders slumped in defeat. Karen, still in shock, was staring at me, her face a mix of confusion, disbelief, and hurt. "Brian, is this true?" Karen's voice cracked as she asked, her eyes wide with terror and betrayal. "Tell me he's lying, please. Tell me this isn't real." Her hands trembled as she reached for him, but her trust in him, the very foundation of their marriage, had just shattered in front of her eyes. Brian hesitated, running a hand through his hair. It was almost as if he were searching for the right words. But nothing came out. The seconds stretched, thick with tension, as Karen's gaze turned to him, desperate for an explanation. The longer he stayed silent, the more the truth became undeniable. "Can we not do this here?" Brian finally muttered, his voice barely audible, though his discomfort was apparent. His words fell flat, and the crowd's murmurs grew louder as the gravity of the situation hit everyone. "Oh no. Brian," I snapped, stepping forward with purpose. "We're doing this here. You didn't care about discretion when you were sneaking around with my wife. So why should you get privacy now?" The crowd stirred, some neighbors exchanging looks, others whispering to each other. I could feel the tension thickening. This wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about the public exposure of a web of lies, a betrayal that would ripple through every corner of our social circle. Karen looked like she might collapse. Her hands shook as she took a step closer to Brian, her voice rising in anger and heartbreak. "You cheated on me with her." She pointed directly at Lisa, her face contorting in disbelief. "After everything I've done for this family, after all the sacrifices I've made for you." Lisa's mouth opened to speak, but Karen cut her off with a sharp, "Don't you dare." She turned to her husband, her voice filled with rage. "Don't you dare try to justify this." Karen's words hit me harder than I'd expected. It wasn't just Lisa I was confronting. It was Brian's betrayal of Karen, the wife who had trusted him, the woman who had built a life with him, only to have him destroy everything for a fleeting affair. Lisa, meanwhile, had gone quiet. Her eyes were brimming with tears, but no one came to her defense. She was alone now. The truth hung in the air, suffocating, as every guest in the yard seemed to lean in closer, eager for the next part of the drama to unfold. I stood there, watching Karen unleash her fury on Brian. It felt strange, in a way, to witness it. For months, I had been consumed with anger and pain, but watching someone else share in that pain, watching Lisa squirm under the weight of her actions, brought a twisted sense of satisfaction. Lisa glanced around at the guests, her eyes desperate for some form of sympathy. But there was none. The warmth she had once carried among our friends and neighbors evaporated in an instant. No one even looked at her the same way anymore. It was like her betrayal had erased the version of her that they knew. Karen's voice broke as she turned back to Brian, her tears flowing freely now. "I trusted you. Brian," she whispered, shaking her head in disbelief. "I trusted you, and you've destroyed everything." I stepped back slightly, letting Karen's fury take center stage. She had every right to be angry, and I wasn't about to interrupt her moment of catharsis. I had already done what I needed to do. Lisa's affair was exposed, and now the fallout would play out, slowly, painfully, for everyone involved. The crowd was murmuring louder now, some expressing their shock, others discussing the situation amongst themselves. A few people exchanged awkward glances, clearly uncomfortable, but they didn't leave. No one wanted to miss what would come next. Finally, Lisa turned to me, her voice trembling. "James, please, let's talk about this privately. We can fix this. I can fix this." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything that had happened, after she had thrown away our marriage for an affair, she still thought we could fix this. It was laughable. I looked at her, my voice cold and steady. "Talk about what?" "Lisa, about how you lied to me, how you threw away our entire life together for some fling. What exactly is there left to say?" Lisa stepped closer, hands clasped as if in prayer. She looked desperate, like a woman who had been caught stealing, trying to salvage what was left of her dignity. "James, it was stupid. I swear, it didn't mean anything. It was a mistake. A mistake." I laughed bitterly, the anger surging through me once more. "A mistake is forgetting to turn off the stove. A 6-month affair. Lisa, that's not a mistake. It's a series of deliberate choices. Choices that you made, over and over again, knowing exactly what you were doing." Her tears fell freely now, but I didn't feel sorry for her. I couldn't. This wasn't about her pain. It was about mine. "I was lonely," she whispered, her voice small, as if that would explain everything. We'd grown so distant. "James, I felt like you didn't care about me anymore." "Lonely," I repeated, incredulous. "And your solution was to destroy everything we had. To betray me with someone else's husband. You didn't just hurt me." "Lisa, You hurt Karen. You hurt their kids. You hurt everyone who believed in us." At those words, she collapsed into a chair, her face buried in her hands. I watched her sob, and for a fleeting moment, I almost felt pity for her. But then I remembered what she had done. All the lies, the deceit, the betrayal. I reminded myself that this wasn't about her pain. It was about mine. And I didn't owe her anything anymore. "I know I ruined everything," she sobbed, looking up at me through tear-filled eyes. "But I can fix it. I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, counseling, anything. Just don't give up on us. Please." The first stared at her for a long moment, trying to feel something, anything, but there was nothing. No love. No desire to fix things. Nothing. "I don't think there's anything left to fix," I said quietly, my voice steady. "You made it clear what I meant to you when you started sneaking around with Brian. That's not a mistake. Lisa. That's who you are, and I can't be with someone like that." Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't waver. I stood up, grabbing a pillow and blanket from the bed, and started heading toward the guest room. "You can sleep here tonight," I said coldly, not looking back. "We'll figure out the logistics in the morning." The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, lawyers, and awkward conversations with friends and family. Word of the backyard gathering spread like wildfire, and soon, the entire neighborhood knew about Lisa's affair. Our friends, once close-knit, began to distance themselves from her. Karen, understandably, cut all ties with Lisa and filed for divorce from Brian almost immediately. Lisa tried to salvage her reputation, but it was a losing battle. She moved out of the house within a month, taking only what she could carry. The silence she left behind was deafening, but it was also a relief. As for me, I began to rebuild my life. The house, once a symbol of betrayal, became my sanctuary. I rearranged the furniture, painted the walls, and threw myself into hobbies I had neglected for years. Slowly, I began to feel lighter with each passing day. Karen and I spoke a few times after the dust settled. She was heartbroken, but she was also fiercely determined to move forward for the sake of her kids. I admired her strength and found some solace in knowing I wasn't alone in my pain. With every step, I reclaimed my life. The darkness that had weighed on me for so long slowly started to lift, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The weeks following the backyard gathering were filled with a strange combination of relief and sorrow. I felt like I had been living in a fog for months, suffocating under the weight of Lisa's betrayal. But now, with her out of the house, with the truth finally out, a sense of clarity washed over me. The silence in the house was both oppressive and peaceful. It was a reminder of what I had lost, but also of what I had gained. Freedom. Lisa's departure was a long time coming. The house, once a symbol of our shared life, was now just a space I needed to rebuild. I didn't care about the memories or the furniture we had chosen together. What mattered now was my peace of mind. I repainted the walls, rearranged the living room, and started slowly replacing the things that reminded me of her pictures. Keepsakes. Anything that tied me to the past. It felt cathartic in a way I hadn't anticipated. For the first time in years, I began to focus on myself. I took up old hobbies I had neglected when I was busy being a husband, things that made me feel alive. I began jogging again in the mornings, something I hadn't done in ages, and spent weekends in the garden, planting new flowers in the beds where we used to plant together. There was something about the physical act of creating new life that helped me heal. It was like I was planting seeds for my future, ones that were free from the toxicity of the past. I also started talking to people I hadn't really spoken to in a long time, friends who had been pushed aside when I had been so consumed by my marriage, so blind to the cracks. I reached out to them, and they welcomed me with open arms. It was nice to feel like I had a support system again. Even though the foundation of everything I thought I knew had crumbled, they reminded me of who I was before Lisa. I wasn't just a husband. I was someone who had a life outside of my relationship, and I was finally starting to find it again. As the weeks passed, I started to feel less anger and more resignation. I had won the battle. The affair had been exposed, and Lisa had been forced to face the consequences. But victory didn't bring the satisfaction I thought it would. It didn't undo the pain, the humiliation, the trust that had been shattered. It didn't take away the feeling that a part of me had been ripped out and would never return. But slowly, I started to realize that I wasn't defined by what she had done. I wasn't defined by the betrayal. I thought a lot about Karen in those days, the wife of the man who had stolen my wife's affection, the woman who had been blindsided just as I had been. She had reached out to me a couple of times in the aftermath of everything. We talked mostly about the logistics of the affair, about the things they had shared, and what we both had to go through. But the conversations were never easy. There was an unspoken bond between us. A shared understanding of the pain that only someone who had been through this could understand. Karen was strong. Stronger than I ever thought I could be in her shoes. She never wallowed in her grief for too long. She had children to raise and a life to rebuild. Even though the rug had been pulled out from under her, I admired that. In some strange way, she gave me hope that I could get through this, too. But it was also clear that Karen and I were in different places. I didn't want to get involved with someone else so soon, not with the emotional scars I still had from Lisa. I needed time to heal, to rediscover who I was without the woman who had once been my everything. Karen, too, was healing. But she was more focused on the future, on her children, on rebuilding her life with the firm conviction that she wasn't going to let this affair define her. One evening, about a month after Lisa left, Karen called me. She was at peace now, or at least seemed to be. She had filed for divorce. And though it was a long and painful process, she was moving forward. She even mentioned that she was thinking about selling their house and relocating to be closer to her family. "It's time for a new start," she said. I could hear the strength in her voice. And it made me realize that it was time for me to do the same. I didn't need a fresh start in the sense of running away to another place. What I needed was to reclaim my life, my happiness, and my purpose. I had been so consumed by the need to protect my marriage and my family that I had forgotten who I was before all of it. And now, I was starting to find that again. A few months later, I ran into Karen again, by accident, at a local coffee shop. She was sitting with a friend, laughing, looking completely different, like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. We exchanged pleasantries, and I could tell that she had moved on. She had rebuilt her life, and there was no animosity between us. She was a different person now, one who had been through hell but had emerged stronger, just like me. "James," she said as we parted ways, "I hope you find happiness again. You deserve it." Her words struck me more than I expected. I did deserve happiness. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like it was within my reach. The process of healing wasn't quick. There were days when I still missed the life I had with Lisa. Days when I still questioned what went wrong, why she had made the choices she did. But those days became fewer. The weight of betrayal slowly lifted. And as the months went by, I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. It wasn't just about moving on from Lisa. It was about reclaiming my identity. About becoming the man I had been before my marriage. Before I lost myself in someone else's choices. I was no longer defined by her actions. And that realization was the beginning of true freedom. One evening, I sat on the back porch, a beer in hand, watching the sunset. The house was quiet, peaceful. It felt like home again. I had no idea what the future held. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of it. Lisa had left. But she had also given me something I hadn't expected. She had forced me to face the truth. She had forced me to rebuild my life from the ground up. And in doing so, she had given me the opportunity to live a life that was mine, and mine alone. I raised my bottle in a silent toast to new beginnings. To the peace that had finally settled over me. And most of all, to the truth. No matter how painful it had been. Because it was only by facing the truth that I had finally found myself again.